Welcome to this week's episode of Sussex Sport Weekly podcast. I'm Matt Pohl, and this week I'm joined by Brighton Hove Albion writer Frankie Elliott, Crawley Town expert Mark Dunford, and Steve Bone of Steve Bone Scorn Prediction Corner fame, who covers all things Sussex for our newspapers and online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Despite the football season coming to a close, it's been anything but quiet at Brighton Hove Albion and Crawley Town. There's huge Albion transfer news surrounding Alexis, McAllister and Levi Colwill. Meanwhile, the Crawley Town fan base known as WAGMI United are at loggerheads once again. We'll also take a look at the goings-on at National League South outfit Eastbourne Borough, who've enjoyed a somewhat tumultuous week, and Sussex Sharks, who are in the middle of a testing T20 Vitality Blast campaign. But the big news this week is Brighton's World Cup winning midfielder Alexis McAllister is set to leave the Amex. Liverpool reportedly completed a £55 million deal to sign the Argentinian from the Seagulls on a 5-year contract. A move away from the Amex has seemingly been on the cards for a while, Frankie, but how big of a blow is this to Brighton, and is it a fair price for him?
I don't think it's that big a blow, and that's not to diminish McAllister at all. I mean, he's clearly an excellent player. We've seen that over the last year. I mean, he's turned into a superstar. I think that's the first and foremost thing. I think the World Cup win, Brighton's run into Europe, the fact he was top goal scorer in that team with some. I know a lot of them were penalties, but they were penalties in the last minute in important games. He's shown himself to be a big game player, been tested themselves against the big teams and always been one of Brighton's best players. So he is a big loss in that sense, is that Brighton are technically losing one of their best players. But he's going for 35 million, which is a good deal for Liverpool more than Brighton. It's still a profit of about 30 million. For Brighton, which is still great business, but it's a very, very good deal for Liverpool because they're getting a 24-year-old who's proven that he can play at that level at a weaker club and a smaller team. And so doing it in a Jurgen Klopp team, I'm sure he will thrive. He's the perfect Liverpool midfielder. His hard work, his ability on the ball, and his ability to get up and down the pitch suits Liverpool the way they play down to the ground. So it's a good deal for everyone in that sense. But I think if you look at it, Brighton's record of dealing with the losses of big characters, both on and off the pitch, in the managerial staff, the boardroom, and on the pitch as well. They've always had a plan. They've always been prepared. And then with McAllister, this isn't a shock. I think since he won the World Cup, I would imagine they would assume he was going to leave this summer. I didn't think there was no worry about January. I think they all were prepared for this summer. So they've had about 6 months. They've probably been doing it for longer. I don't want to undermine their planning strategy. They've probably been ready for about a year or so. So I would assume that this deal being done now just paves the way for the next person to come in. And I don't want to be rude to McAllister again. He is a fantastic player and will do well at Liverpool, but his qualities can be found again. Technically sound player, good eye for a pass, happy to do the dirty work, strong on the ball, strong in the tackle. Those qualities can be found again. Whether that be Mahmoud Dahoud, the Borussia Dortmund player that's coming in, whether that be someone stepping up from the bench, someone like Billy Gilmore or Yassim Ayari, probably a bit too close for Ayari next season, but in 2 years' time, or another player that might be lined up later on this summer. We're not sure, but I truly believe that Brighton can replace him, and you get that feeling from a lot of the fans as well, as they were prepared to lose him. They're not actually too upset to lose him because he wanted to go as well, as much as he gave everything for the club, and they trust the Brighton process that they will be able to replace him. So it's a great deal for him. He deserves it. Brighton have still made a good profit, not as much as they probably would have hoped. But in regards to how they move forward from this, I think they can do it, and very much so as well.
Well, yeah, you touched on the forward planning there, but this news has been offset by what seems to be the impending arrivals of James Milner and Mahmoud Dahoud from Liverpool and Borussia Dortmund, respectively. Frankie, how excited should Albion fans be about the pair, and what will they add to De Zerbi's team?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's a different approach to last season already. Last season, we saw players like Enciso, Gilmore, Estupiñán, who was the only player they signed over the age of 21. So they were very much sticking to the younger model last year. But now they're a European club. They're much more ambitious. We're seeing two more experienced players, more players with Champions League experience, Big Six experience, or big club experience. If you look at Borussia Dortmund coming through the door, still on for a good price. James Milner is the most experienced outfield player in the Premier League. There's no doubt about that. I think nearly 20 or over 20 years of top flight experience. And I think when looking at how De Zerbi, how much he was he needed and praised Pascal Gross this season. I think Milner will be vital to him for the fact he can play so many positions, the fact he can play fullback, both left and right back, and also as a wing back as well, but due to his attacking qualities, because he obviously used to be a winger in his younger years, and also a centre mid, both as a number 8 and as a central defensive mid. That will be vital to Zerbi, because, as I said before about Pascal Gross, when there are 3 games a week and players are going down injured in various positions, in fullback areas or in midfield areas, having someone like Milner to slot in with his experience, with his know-how in these games, will be crucial and will be massive. The only issue I can see with it, as I said before, is whether he will be able to do it at his age. I think he's going to be 38 with players that are not world-class players. So I think, as I said before, playing with the likes of Mo Salah, Virgil van Dijk, Mane when he was there at Liverpool, being 37, you can probably just about get away with it. Playing with lesser players, it might expose him a bit more. I remember Rio Ferdinand at QPR is the best example I can give of that. But also his experience, the experience to the younger players. There's so many players under the age of 25 in that team. Having someone that is a Premier League and Champions League winner, you can't ask for more than that. And then from the Hood, this is the most interesting one for me personally, because, as I said, the McAllister replacement, he is the most likely to be that. He was once the talk of European football when he was at Mönchengladbach. Manchester City wanted him. Jurgen Klopp was very, very adamant of wanting to sign him. He fits the De Zerbi style of play excellently. Effective with both feet, long and short range passing. He finds space very well in between the midfield and the defence to pick up the ball and start attacks, and is very good under the high press as well, using his close control. Not as athletic as someone like Caicedo, but uses his technical ability to get him out of trouble in a lot of situations. So he fits the model perfectly, and also he suits Brighton in the fact that he never quite lived up to the hype. He hasn't managed to set the world alight at Borussia Dortmund, whether that be due to injury, form, the rise of people like Jude Bellingham as well. So it's not quite happened for him yet, but it's not too late. So we've seen how well Welbeck has revitalised his career since he moved to Brighton. This could be the same for Dahoud, and he is a bit younger than Welbeck when he joined. So this is the one that is the most likely to sort of launch Brighton into becoming a stable European club, having a good European season, the stable Premier League season, because he has the quality, the proven quality to play at this level. But he's got some big shoes to fill, and whether he can actually find some form which he hasn't found for years will be the question, how he adapts to the English game. So 2 signings, a real statement about where Brighton are intending to go to, but the biggest thing they're going to have to deal with is probably the player that leaves next, which is Moises Caicedo, which will be a very, very difficult person to replace.
Well, speaking of potential statement signings, Brighton have reportedly lodged a second bid for Levi Colwill. Transfer expert Fabrizio Romano has said the Seagulls are preparing a £40 million bid for the Chelsea defender who spent last season on loan at Albion. They saw an initial £30 million offer rebuffed by the Blues last week. Can you see Chelsea accepting any bids for Colwill, Frankie? I know that he's very highly thought of at the Chelsea hierarchy, and new manager Pochettino likes him.
Well, this is a very, very rare position for Chelsea to be in, because the loan system that they've used for years is off the base of the fact that all the Chelsea players that go out on loan are going out on loan to play for the first team. They want to play for the first team. If you look at someone like Conor Gallagher, he came back from his successful loan move at Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace wanted to make that deal permanent, but Gallagher himself said no, because his aim and his ambition was to play for that Chelsea team. When you look at Colwill, he's come off the back of a season which has never happened before, where the team he has played for has done miles better than the team that he is than Chelsea. So he's looking at the way Chelsea are run. He's looking at the amount of players that are there, the chaos that has ensued, and for the first time in their sort of in this last 20 years at Chelsea, they've got a young player from their famed academy going, I don't want to stick around anymore. I'd quite like to move permanently. So I don't see Chelsea actually accepting a bid unless it's forced through by him, but from what we are hearing, could be quite likely, whether that be a transfer request or the refusal of signing a new deal, because he only has 2 years left on his Stamford Bridge contract. I don't think money is an issue for Chelsea in that sense. So I think 40 million, I think they will still reject. But if they reject and Colwill then starts making a lot of noise, it could force it through, which like I said, has never really been the case, just because to move to a club outside the top 6 from them is unheard of, and not what many players have wanted to do in the past. But it seems the tide has changed, And it could be the very rare situation where someone is forcing a move out because Brighton is a better proposition than Chelsea. So I think it's all down to him personally. I don't think Chelsea will accept unless he makes the move for it.
Do you think he is actually featuring in part of their long-term planning? So looking at the centre halves they've got, and you've got players like Badia Shile and Wesley Fofana, and they're both 2019. Do you see Colwill actually featuring for Chelsea in the future, or is it just a case of Chelsea potentially protecting an asset at this stage?
So this already raises the first issue of the Pochettino era, is the fact that we've been told that Pochettino will have a lot of say over transfers and who he wants in his team. So the reason that Chelsea are not looking to sell is Pochettino sees Colwill as a part of his plans. However, we also know that Chelsea's squad is completely over-bloated and needs trimming down desperately. So if you look at the left-sided centre-back, which is what Levi Colwill is, he's got Benoit Badiashile in front of him, who signed a 7.5-year deal in January. And is 22 years old, so he's not going anywhere. They're not going to sell him. That'd be ludicrous. They've also got Koulibaly, who plays on the left side defence and played a lot there last year. He's still got 3 years left on his deal and was a summer signing. Sorry, last summer he was signed for big money. So it's unlikely they're going to sell him. So the only one that is really viable as a player that can be sold is Levi Colwill. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He doesn't look likely to sign one unless he gets a move. And also he acts as pure profit for the club because he's an academy graduate and they need to make up the lost revenue from not getting into the Champions League or any European football this season. So who's in charge here? Because if it was the board, the only logical thing would be to sell Colwill. But if Pochettino wants him, then they're going to have to keep him. But then who do they get rid of? So the mess of last season for Chelsea is going to take the thing with Pochettino is I don't think it will be an instant success because the ludicrous gun-ho approach of signing so many players last year has meant it will take years to really get through what Pochettino wants because it's just a mess in regards to how big this squad is and getting it trimmed down, but also making it competitive, but also making it what Pochettino wants, but also making it financially work. This summer will be the starting point, but it won't be finished by the end of this summer. So the Colwill transfer has already caused a problem and he's barely even got going yet, bless him.
Do you also think that the Blues will also play hardball due to their previous dealings with Albion, Frankie? Looking on social media, Blues fans seem quite reticent to the idea of selling Colwill to Brighton after Chelsea's moves for Cucurella and Graham Potter and their failed January pursuit for Caicedo, or is that maybe just me reading a little bit too much into it?
I'm not sure about hardball, but then, I mean, for me personally, it would be logical for them to start using Caicedo as part of the bargaining tool because they need a centre midfielder. The Kante is obviously going and they've got no central defensive midfielder in their team. They wanted Caicedo in January and are still rumoured to be wanting to get him. So it's not the last time I imagine we'll be hearing Chelsea and Brighton dealing with each other. So it may sound ludicrous, but some sort of deal including the two of them just seems the most logical step. So I don't know about hardball or whether they, what the relationship is like anymore. But I feel like both sides want something from each other. They should probably work together to get it because it works for both teams. So we'll see. We shall see.
Well, on the Crawley Town front, the Crawley Town Supporters Alliance sent an email to all members which sought to provide the CTSA with the strongest possible mandate to help achieve the best outcome for the club at a critical time in its long history. The statement can be read in full on sussexworld.co.uk/sport. But for those who haven't read the article, could you sum up the CTS statement, please, Mark?
Yeah, so basically their aim is to get the prompt replacement out of Eben Smith and Preston Johnson to safeguard the future of Crawley Town Football Club. What they've done, they're going to have a ballot and they're going to get all the members of the CTSA. I'm not sure how many members that actually is, but how many they've got at the moment. But they basically are going to present two options for the CTSA to continue its efforts to persuade WAGMI United to engage with us and facilitate our request to replace the current co-chairman. That's option one. Option B is for the CTSA to pursue any alternative legal means necessary to ensure the current co-chairman are replaced. So the ballot takes place this Saturday, I think, and it's at 11 a.m. And yeah, so they want the co-chairman out, Smith and Johnson out. It's been a sort of a very strained relationship it started off quite well between the owners and the CTSA, but now there's just no communication between them. They did meet a couple of times. I think they met with Chris Galley before he left in January, and then they met with Eben Smith as well. They released the minutes and they discussed a few things, but since then there's been no communication at all between them. The owners, they've been hot and cold with myself with when they replied to messages and that. I've asked questions. I know Ruben Watt, the chairman of the CTSA, is constantly on Preston Johnson's case about having a conversation and that, and there's nothing happening. So they've sort of been put into a corner, the CTSA, and they basically want the best for the football club. And they're hoping that this, well, like you said, gives them the strongest possible mandate to achieve, as they've put it, the best outcome for the club in this critical time in its long history. So it's going to be very interesting what the result of the vote is, and then if the owners actually do anything about it, and whether it does have any kind of effect on the club.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, from what we've heard from you, the Crawley fan base have not been particularly happy with the way WAGMI United and, as you said, Smith and Johnson have run the Reds for a while, it seems. Do you think this latest statement will change anything at the club? If not, what do you think it would take for Smith and Johnson to pack their bags and leave, potentially?
Well, I don't think they will anytime soon pack their bags and leave. But, I mean, they said when they took over the club, if the club are not promoted to League One within 2 seasons, they will step down as chairman and they will let the fans vote as who will be the next chairman. So they've got that in their back pocket to say, look, we've told you we'll step down if we don't get promoted this year. So just give us another season, see how we get on. And if we don't, we'll walk away like we said we will. So I think they want this to work. And I don't think just one season going badly is going to be enough for them to say, okay, yeah, we don't know what we're doing. We'll walk away. We'll put it in someone else's hand. I think they'll learn from all the mistakes they've made this year and go it forward. But whether they will or not, like I say, I've said before, they do care. I've spoken to both of them, Eben and Preston, and they do want this to work, but it's just a case of getting the right people in now, the CEO, the director of football, to help them make it work. And then I don't want, not to say they want to prove the fans wrong, but just to prove that they know what they're doing. And then actually the fans will sit back and go, actually, yeah, fair play. Yeah, although I think there are some fans that will never accept them as owners. But I think the CTSA were willing to give them a try, but they're just not communicating with them. And I can see where the CTSA's frustrations are coming from. Would you say that bridge has been burnt between the owners and the CTSA now? It appears to have done, yes. Yeah, they just the lack of communication. It is poor. I mean, I know Wrexham is the obvious comparison. I mean, like, love them or loathe them, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhaney, they're all over the place. Everybody knows who they are. They make themselves visible. They appear to communicate with the fans. And that's all the Crawley fans want and the CTSA want. They just want that level. Obviously, it's a different thing. Ryan Reynolds is a Hollywood star. Yeah. Preston Johnson used to be on ESPN talking about sports betting and made his money from there. But they just need to communicate more. And I do think I can't see a way back between the relationship between the two. I mean, the only way it will be is if they win League Two next season, which I don't think they're going to do. Oh no, there's plenty of your teams like Wrexham and Notts County in there, I think will go straight back up. So what would you see at this early stage as a good season for Crawley? Just an improvement on this one? Yeah, I think any point, if they come to the last few games of the season, they've got a chance of getting in the playoffs. That is a good season for Crawley Town this year, and it's a huge improvement. Yeah. And if Scott Lindsay's still there at the end of the season, I think that's a big step forward as well for the club, because I just hope if they're sort of mid-table-ish in the middle of the season, they don't panic and think, oh, God, it's not quite what we wanted, and they start thinking of changes. I just hope they give Scott Lindsay the time and the budget to do what he wants to do at the club, because I think he's the right man for the job. Well, meanwhile, Tony Craig has departed the Broadfield Stadium on a free. The veteran defender who made over 100 appearances during his time at the Reds has joined National League outfit Dorking Wanderers. I think Craig was one of the players that you predicted to depart Crawley, so no real surprises there, Mark. But do you think this is going to be the first of many exits over the summer? Yeah, I think there will be. Like we said recently, Scott Lindsay said he has to get rid of players to bring players in, and they do need 3 or 4 really good experienced League Two players to come in, and that will mean people having to leave. And we've said it before: Kwesi, Appiah, Jake Tyler. I can't see a future for them at the club. So I think they're on their way out. And there might be a couple of others. You never know. There are people who are like Nick Cerula, who I know he's extended his contract to the club, but he's very highly thought of and thought of to being one of the better players in the squad. And you never know, there might be someone coming with a bid for him in the League One club or one of the higher League Two clubs. So if they want to get some money in, they've got to get money in to spend. So I think we will see maybe 3 or 4 more exits this summer, but definitely Tyler and Kwesi. So but it's going to be interesting to see who they do bring in, if they do bring anyone in. So but just hope they do it soon. It does seem like a long time since the end of the season and literally no new transfers. You see other clubs starting to make movements now. But as Steve Leake said in this week's column in the Crawley Observer, that they didn't sign Dom Telford until June the 24th last year. So it's one of those ones where all the signings will probably happen at once and it'll all be ready for the beginning of the season and everybody will be like, well, what was the panicking about?
Absolutely. Well, looking into non-league now, Eastbourne Borough have announced that businessman Simon Leslie has become the club's new owner. Steve Bone, could you give us a lowdown on who Simon Leslie is and what his plans are for the sports?
Yes. So, as you said in your intro, Matt, it's been quite a remarkable few weeks at Eastbourne Borough. I think fans at the end of the season thought, well, that was a great season. Let's have a quiet few weeks now and then get ready for another go next season. Not had the chance to do that because we reported about a month ago that they were talking to a potential new majority owner. And then last Friday night, it was finally announced that Simon Leslie is that man and the deal has been completed. I don't think it's actually quite been completed yet, but it's subject to the small print it's going to be. So Simon Leslie is a Sussex-based businessman, very successful businessman and entrepreneur, co-founder of the world's largest travel media company called Inc. I believe he's cornered the market in in-flight magazines and that sort of publishing side of things. He's also written books on that subject. He's a very well-regarded business speaker in that sort of field as well. And now he's turned his attentions to football and to Eastbourne Borough. What we don't know yet, because we haven't spoken to him and he hasn't really spoken publicly since this came out, is why football and why Eastbourne Borough. But hope to be finding that out in due course.
Well, Leslie's first act as Borough owner was to sensationally remove popular manager Danny Bloor from his role. Just 3 days after the takeover was announced. Bloor was offered other roles at Priory Lane as they planned a new data-driven approach to football, but he declined to accept any of them. How big of a blow is the departure of Bloor, Steve? He's created so many great memories at the club. And should Borough fans already be worried about what the future holds?
Well, it was a genuine shock when this was announced on Monday night. I think it was a shock to us. I'm sure it was a shock to Borough fans and probably to a lot of other people at the club as well, because the indications when we knew that a new majority owner was probably coming in, what we heard was that Danny Bloor's sort of infectious enthusiasm for the job and for the club and for the relationship with the fans was one of the factors that had drawn the new investor to the club. That perhaps is not quite as it seems now. I think it's a gamble personally because Danny has done really well on a not on a sort of shoestring budget as such, but on a budget that is much less than many other clubs at that level of non-league, at step 2 of non-league. He's done very well. He's playoffs last season, end of last season when they lost to Oxford City, very close to playoffs again this season. They've had some fantastic runs. They've had sort of month unbeaten here and there during those 2 seasons. Also got to the first round of the FA Cup in 2020, played Blackpool, which unfortunately was behind closed doors at that time, but again, a big day for the club. The new owner has clearly got different ideas, wanted Danny Bloor to stay at the club, but not as manager. He wants to do things a different way to the way he thought Danny Bloor would be doing things. I'm old school when it comes to football, and I'm always of the view that if things ain't broke, don't try to fix them. And I think a lot of Eastbourne Borough fans will be thinking that at the moment. Obviously, I'm sure they'll give the new manager, whoever that will be, a chance. But I think Danny was very popular. and the new manager's got, he's got a job on his hands when he first comes in to win the fans over and show that what has happened is the right move for the club.
Well, following Blaw's departure, a statement on Borough's website said, moving forward, we will have a more data-driven approach to recruitment, preparation and analysis, using the latest AI technology, equipment and platforms to manage the performance and welfare of our players. First of all, Steve, what on earth does that mean? And can you hazard a guess as to how it will work?
It worries me, that part of the statement, and I'm sure it worries a lot of Eastbourne Borough fans as well. I think most football fans in Sussex and perhaps further afield would have had the same thought when they read that. And that is, isn't that what Crawley Town's new owners said just over a year ago when they came in? Data-driven analysis using all the sort of data and technology available to work out who's playing well and who's not. I just think some people are trying to turn football into an exact science, which is not and never will be. Clearly the new Eastbourne Borough owner has done his homework and he knows what he wants and he thinks it can work, and maybe it will. Maybe we'll be sort of eating our words at the end of next season if Eastbourne Borough win National South. I don't know. He's talking about different ways of managing the players' performance and welfare, which on its own sounds fine. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to make that a top priority? But I think until people can see how that's going to work, there will be a certain amount of cynicism about it.
Well, as Steve's mentioned there, Mark, you've kind of seen it all before with Crawley, with stuff like this. Have you got a kind of prediction for Eastbourne Borough, or is it a bit too dissimilar from Crawley in the way that it's all happened?
Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's too dissimilar at all. But all the data-driven stuff and that, it's. I think it does work. It can work, but just not at that level, because you like League Two, Crawley Town. You can bring in all the players on stats, and their stats can look great. But when you come up against Stockport County away from home, who are all 6'4" and but not to stereotype any, but the northern teams are big teams and they play a certain type of football, the majority of them. It just, whatever you do, whatever you think, this is the style of football we're going to play and we're going to stick to it, and it proved it under Kevin Betsy, it just doesn't work. You have to be able to adapt, and you have to have a certain amount of just sort of, it's like the player's mentality. You can't put a stat on, you can't find data on a player's mentality. And I think at that level, you get too many teams like that. And it's from National South to League Two. There is a jump there, but it's not a huge gap.
Yeah.
So I just think to some extent it works. I mean, you can find out a lot about a player from data, but you don't find everything out. And at that level, I just think there's a certain way you need to play football. And it's all about just getting results. And data is not going to get you results every week in, week out. It will work. You'll play wonderful football one game and you'll win 3-0 and it'll be marvellous. The next game you'll play exactly the same time, but it'll be a completely different team. They park the bus, they lump the ball forward, header 1-0, header 2-0, header 3-0, and that's it. So it's an interesting one. I'll be watching it to see if it does work at Eastbourne Borough. And like we say, I hope it does work because we want to see success in Sussex football teams and that, but it's just, I don't know. I am a little bit sceptical. I'm all up for change, and I love technology in football and things like that, and in all sports. But I just think, you've got to balance it out with a bit of common sense as well. I don't know what you think, Frankie.
Well, I was just going to add that the whole data-driven thing in football, it can be used successfully. Obviously, Brentford are the best example of it. They were the first team to bring the sort of the money ball scheme, it was called, obviously after the film has been used in America quite a lot. And
great film as well. Great film.
It's a great film. But the most important part is, which is what Crawley learned quite quickly, I think, is that you can say flashy things like data driven, AI, whatever you'd like, but the most important thing is having good footballing people behind it. So the reason that Brentford was successful is they employed a lot of good footballing people from Germany and around Europe. And the thing is that the best decision Crawley made this season was appointing Scott Lindsay, who is a fantastic footballing man, knows the league inside out. That's what got them safe. He's a great manager. So the Eastbourne Borough thing is the same thing. You can say, by all means, go down the data-driven method. It's probably the future, but it requires not just you to use data, it's to have the footballing people there who know the game inside out. So that's always going to be the issue. And especially, as you say, when you go further down the leagues, it's more difficult to find the correct data and the best footballing people that know how to use the data. So regardless of what is being used, whether it be the data method or not, if you don't have experienced football people in the decision-making parts of your football club, that's where it all fails. I mean, look at Chelsea. That's your best example. There's no footballing people in that team. It's a disaster. And so it flows right down from the top of football right down to the bottom.
Well, we'll keep an eye on Borough and see how they get on next season. Meanwhile, on the cricket front, Sussex are currently in the middle of their T20 Vitality Blast campaign, and it's not been going great for the Sharks. Paul Farbrace's side have so far won one of their 4 games and 6, setting from bottom in the South Group, albeit having played a game less than bottom of the table Middlesex. I think most people would temper their expectations a little bit for Sussex in the Vitality Blast this season, Steve, but I don't think many people envisioned it going as badly as it has.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's been very disappointing so far. And you're getting to the stage now with, I think they've got 8 games left in the group. They probably would need to win something like 7 out of 8 to get through to the knockout stages, which is not impossible. It's actually what Hampshire did last year. And when they went on to win it. So it can be done, but it's still not easy. I think expectations were a little lower this year, partly because of last year. Sussex struggled last year as well. But now without people like Luke Wright, who is a solid batsman in that format and was for many years for Sussex, they've not managed to bring Rashid Khan back, the Afghanistan, one of the top operators in the world in that format. But having said that, they've still got a decent side. You've got Ravi Bopara as captain. They've brought in Nathan McAndrew across the formats this season, and he's been doing okay without setting the world on fire. And of course, the other big signing for the 2020 was Shadab Khan. It's just not really clicked for him or for anyone. Bopara's had a couple of half decent knocks. The irony of it is that the hardest game away to Surrey at the Oval, where very few teams beat Surrey, is the one game that Sussex have won. So they've gone there and shown what they can do, but they haven't done it in the games where you'd expect them to win. And it's been a combination, really. You can't just pin it on the bowlers or the batsmen. It's been across the board. They've not been getting enough runs on the board. And they've not been bowling tightly enough, whether sort of chasing or defending a total. So, Paul Farbrace has been quite honest and open about it. He's saying, we're not doing some of the basics right. We're letting ourselves down. We've got the talent there, but we're not putting it to good use. We're not competing, I think he said after one game. So it's down to him and the players to turn it around. But if they don't turn it around very quickly, 2 games in the next 2 days, as we speak here now, that's going to be another campaign out the window.
Frankie and Mark, where do you think it's gone wrong for the Sharks this season? Starting with you, Frankie, where do you think it's gone wrong?
Well, I mean, from when they spoke about revamping this team at the start of this season, I think in cricket it's always very difficult to say you're revamping a whole side because you have 3 formats of the game, and so to try and put all your energy into all 3 and building all 3 sides is extremely difficult. I got the impression from what they were saying, because it's an Ashes summer, and the way they were talking about the previous 3 years, their main focus was the county team. I think they felt they had a strong enough group of players and have got a previously good experience in the one day and T20 format that that will sort of take care of itself. They need to put much more attention to what's been a dire county record. And I think we're seeing the consequence of that. They've started the county season okay. It's not been amazing, but it's been a very solid start with a victory on the first day, of course, and they haven't lost yet. But with the T20 thing, I think it's come to a case where they've sort of it's come to this, and they've gone, we probably need to give this a bit more work than we first thought. And I remember that. I remember other side of that is England felt the effect of that one with the World Cup. They put all their eggs into the white ball game. They built a brilliant white ball team that won the World Cup, and then the Ashes came, and the Test series that came after was a complete disaster. So I think it's the flip reverse thing of that. If I'm being totally honest.
Mark, how do you think this? How do you think this season in general has gone so far for Sussex as a wider picture?
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Frankie said. They've had a solid start in the county championship, but it's just been so disappointing in the T20 because I always look forward to going to Edgbaston and having eating all day while watching some good T20 cricket at finals day. But it's like Steve said. I mean, they could do what Hampshire did last year, but you just can't see it. I mean, you watched on Saturday night when Sussex played at the Ageas Bowl. I don't think I've ever seen a more one-sided T20 game. I mean, I was surprised Sussex actually got up to 130, 140, whatever it was in the end. But then it just looked like, and it almost was, men against boys because it was such a young Sussex side. And it was just like, oh my God. And then you've got the hat-trick that Simon Harmer took.
Yes.
I mean, that 3 of possibly the worst shots I've ever seen played by professional cricketers. There was just no plan to it. There was just, so it's surprising, isn't it, when you've got someone like Paul Farbrace in charge, that performances like that are happening. But it is a young side, and I suppose we can't be too critical. But I don't know. I don't know what it is that's been so poor. But they need to up the performances. And like you say, if they lose the next 2 games, they've got so many games that are dead rubbers now. And is that a good thing for a young player? I mean, I suppose they can play with a bit of freedom, but it's just, or their heads are just going to be down, and it's not good for anyone's career at this at that stage of their career, early stages and that. So, I can't put my finger on why it is so bad, but it just is. It's a shocker, really.
What point does having a young squad stop being an excuse? Because it seems for the past 2-3 seasons they have used that as a reason as to why they've not performed. At what point can you feasibly say, come on now, you can't use that anymore?
They said they said this year. That was what they said. They said that from this year we'll stop using the excuse of young players because that's not good enough. We've got good young players. We want to turn them into good cricketers. Now, the issue has been, and I agree with Mark, is the naivety of some of the bowling and batting has just been ludicrous. And it doesn't matter if you're young or not; it's just simply not good enough. So I think in that sense, whether they turn it around or not, I think that's something that Paul Farbrace will have to address. Is like, well, this isn't actually good enough anymore. We need to make some serious changes because I think as a young player yourself, you get told, don't worry, you're young, it's fine. You don't actually learn from it because, as Mark said, that's the easiest hat-trick you'll ever see taken. It's like bowling to school children. So it's going to have to be probably a bit more cutthroat with them rather than just giving them, which is what they said at the start. They said it's no more about patting them on the head and saying, it's all right, we're developing. They're trying to turn a team into winners. And in doing that, you have to make some hard decisions. So that, I would imagine, will either take place the next season or even during the rest of this season if they get knocked out in the next 2 games.
Well, any other business, chaps, that I've failed to mention?
We've just seen Sam Morton, who has been on this podcast. He's just sent us Alex McAllister's statement. He's put on Instagram, it's time to say goodbye to the club. So we'll be following that up on sussexworld.co.uk. But so he's actually said goodbye now, and I think he's signed it off by saying, "You will always have a special place in my heart." So we started with McAllister, we finished with McAllister.
Lovely symmetry to the podcast is what you like to
yes.
see. Well, thank you very much for this week, chaps. So absolutely brilliant as always. You can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we've talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next week.
Cheers, guys.